Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for coming and hanging out. So we are going to do our last piece of the puzzle, and that is the little yellow finch himself. Let me just move my camera a little bit. There we are. Stay. Behave yourself. There we go. Alright, for this part, my intentions are to get this guy pretty much close to done, if not done, and hopefully under 55 minutes. I didn't realize I was recording that long. I got a little bit too happy playing around with the thistle. Why didn't you guys tell me? Oh well. So I am going to just go with the yellow that is in my kit. Bad cat's watching me. Let's see here. All right. You get a good amount of this yellow, and I'm pretty much going to put pure yellow on the far side of him, because remember, I'm having the light come from up here but behind a little bit. So this is really where the brightest yellow is going to be, and we will change it as we go. But yeah, let's see here. We'll just nip those down in there. I do not want very much of this yellow in between. I'm basically going to put it down in the bigger areas, but I am going to leave quite a bit of white in between this purple and the yellow, because if the two get together, it's going to make brown, and that's not how it would really appear in real life. It would just seem like purple in front of yellow. Maybe from a distance it would, but this up close and detailed, I definitely don't want those colors to mix. So I will leave some white areas. And I'm going to let the paint itself get lighter as I go around. Need more water to move. So that way he has some really nice bright yellow areas in addition to the fades that I am putting in. This helps me especially. It helps me from getting too slap happy with the color. When it needs to fade, it needs to show the movement, that this is a round little pudgy guy sitting on top of this thistle. Rather than, okay, bright white here because that's where the light is, and this bird is yellow, and well, feathers are a little bit shiny, so there's actually going to be some white along this area over some of his whites, or some of his yellows are going to be a little bit white in some places along the edges, but I find this to make everything so much easier just to go with my pure yellows where my darkest areas will be. And then I'll darken them up as I need to, and then I'll push that around to all the other places I need it. Now, I am going to look at my photos that I got over here, make sure I'm not putting any yellow in the white on this bird. We're just going to leave that. I might even, because a little bit of dirt and my pencil wouldn't quite erase, it was being quite naughty on me. And it could also be because of the paper I am using. 140 pound is not my fave. Alright. It just doesn't, it holds on to all the things you don't want it to hold on to, and then it won't keep things nice and smooth that you want to keep nice and smooth, and it's just mean. It's downright cruel. Alright, now I'm probably going to put a little bit more on the pure side. I'm not going to water it down too terribly much into these little tinier areas here. There we go. Not too much. And if you look at the photos, if you've clicked on this video by accident, there are 2 other videos showing you background, the thistle, and now we are working on the finch. But in all the other videos, I made mention of a link so that way you could look up the pictures that I'm using for a reference. And I will also include them in the comment, or not the comments, but the description below this video as well, so that way you can still look it up. But one of the other reasons why I choose such a dark background with such light colored imagery and subjects is because in those videos, obviously you can see those little birds and they are in front of nice bright green areas, very light greens, and then they kind of fade into the background. They kind of homogenize quite a bit. So, I mean, while maybe this is just a dark forest behind my little bird, it could be almost anything because we made it very, very dark, but with several patches of highlights in deep green. So that way it could almost be anything. It's just a background. But that's why I choose such a dark background with such light colored subjects, because in those photos our subjects start to kind of bleed into the background just a little bit, makes them harder to see, and I really want them to pop. All right, now I did increase the intensity of the yellow in here around his head or his neck area, so that way you can kind of get the feeling of that he does have a neck. I'm not just going in and washing in everything all nice and straight and flush and, you know, same brush strokes. I like to follow the shape of the body. So here's his little belly, and well, here's his little neck. I'm kind of using the pure yellow as basically what you would think of if you were doing a pencil drawing as my black and leaving my white just to represent my white. So that way it helps describe the shape of the form. It makes it feel a little bit more realistic, a little bit more 3D, and a whole lot less flat and on paper. It just helps. Alright, so I'm going to put some yellow in his beak. Kind of forgot about that. A little more than that, come on now. I want to make sure that I leave kind of the top part of his beak here white and put in some more of that intense yellow. There we go. Okay. Now I am going to go for the black in my kit. And I'm going to make sure, I'm going to use my my testing area to see how thick my water to black pigment ratio is, so that way I'm not just putting on this streak of pure black. I actually want it to have a little bit of fade. So I'm going to start with his eye first. Nice little round eye. Nice little test area, because that area will be black. So that's pretty much where I want it. So if I made a mistake, then this little area would have tested it out for me. And alright, so looking at the picture, we got his little head, and that black kind of goes over his eye just a little bit. There's like this little yellow strip area that goes right over the eye between the cap on his head and his actual eyeball. There is that little separation. And then it goes down predominantly a little bit on his face there. And then we'll come over. And if we look at the video where, or not the video, but the picture where he is on a log, we see the beak kind of comes up into the face and the black goes around it. So make sure that is in there. And I'm going to leave this little white area. I'm going to make it a very light gray to show the shine of the feathers. against the light that would be coming in from this direction. Just kind of smooth it out just a little bit. And now I can go in there with deep blacks. I'm going to let it dry for a little bit first. But then I can go in and touch it up with deeper blacks and build from there. Now we're going to do the little black areas on his wings. And I'm going to just kind of scratchy these guys in here. And I'll blacken those up a little bit later. But I'm going to go down to the second bunch of feathers here. And just going around some of those pieces of my thistle. All right. Okay, now we got that going. Now for the white. Now that white, I'm not going to do too much with it. All I'm going to do, because if you look at where the curly piece of wrought iron is in the photo, the link in the photo, you can see on his wing the white space that's in between here. You can kind of see the individual feathers going on. So I'm just going to take a damp paintbrush and I'm just going to drag a little bit of that darkness downwards. That will keep it from getting way too dark, because if we go over there and get new pigment, it's going to be way too much. But it also helps the connection of the feeling that these are feathers. Make that one a little bit darker and pull it down just a little bit, There we go. Maybe I'll pull up a little. I'm going to just kind of slightly, very lightly come in here and shade just a little bit. And I'm going to get my detail brush to do a little bit more, but then that way it feels like these feathers are a little bit more on top of these feathers, so that way it feels like something's blocking a little bit of light. It gives it a little bit more realism. I'm going to take away some of the black here on the back part of this wing, just a wee bit. There we go. A little better. There we are. Now this top, his cap here, ought to be nice and dry for us, so go back in there with some more pure deep black. And just kind of fill in a little bit. And I'm just using the very tip of this brush to do a lot of this. So I still want to give the illusion of feathers, and even though it all looks really homogenized in the end, it does make a difference whether or not, if you're just laying the colors down flat versus actually giving them some sort of form. And plus, it's a good practice to keep in. Giving things form all the time is just going to keep you from forgetting to do it when you do need to do it, because you haven't been possibly doing a whole bunch of detail work. I'm just going to lift a little bit. I kind of feel like maybe some more light should be coming across his little forehead there. Again, to add a little bit more dimension going on, and also to kind of give an area where all this white line is fading into him a little bit. It keeps it from looking quite so harsh. There we go. That feels a lot better. Let's see here. Okay. So that is that part of it. Now we're going to do the beak, and I think I'm going to move on to my detail brush here. And this brush is a spotter, 10/0 there. And this guy is super tiny little guy, but he's longer, which allows him to hold on to more pigment and a little bit more water. He can go for a little bit longer than some of my other even tinier detail brushes, and there are some areas where I need him to go the extra mile. So for his beak, I have this really odd orange here, and honestly, you know what? Forget the orange. Yeah. I'm gonna go with sienna. It's right by my red. There we go. Alright. And this is pretty much his beak's a nice warm color. The yellow is going to end up being our highlight color, a good deal of it. There are a couple of little white areas that I have left in here, and those I'm not going to touch. But the yellow is another one of the highlights. So this sienna is going to end up representing a great deal of the shading on his beak. So you have this little area right in here for his little beak where it dips in. There we go. And then the line kind of fades as it goes out this way. I'll end up blending that out, and the only really part of the line that you really need to see is probably right up here next to his face. Yep, need more water. Alright, that is more than enough sienna for this whole beak. I'm probably going to end up being too much. Yeah. So we'll just remove some. There we go. I'm following kind of the shape of the beak as I go, so that way, again, form. I'm going to make this line disappear a little bit. There we are. All right. Now, I'm pretty happy with that. Anything, I'm probably going to shorten his beak just a little bit and dip it down. Come on, dip, dip, dip. Oh, that's what you get for not picking up some pigment. It works a lot of the time, but there are just times when, you know, nothing wants to work with you. It all just wants to misbehave. Looks like maybe I need to reshape his beak just a little bit. There we go. There, much much closer. That would be something I do off camera. I don't want to waste too much of your time here fiddle farting with his beak. It looks like it might need a little time to dry too. So now I'm going to pick up my spotter again, and I'm going to pick up a lot of black, and I'm just going to go in and kind of give some hairline little areas, you know, just a touch more detailed to make it look more like feathers. Really try to define the line just a little bit, and I'm not going all the way down. Just a tiny bit is all you really need to help. And also in these the lighter area, I'm also putting some of those lines as well of the pure black, so that way you have the illusion of a feather laying on top of a feather on top of a feather. So this line ends up kind of being your shadow as opposed to an actual line. Let's see. Alrighty. And now, whoosh. Let's see here. Now there's a couple of things we can do with his chest to kind of define him a little bit more. Now we have a couple of options. We could try to pick up some of the background color, maybe even some of this dark green to represent our shading areas. We could bring down the sienna off of his beak and bring some of it down to represent our slightly darker areas as well. So that way it's not like the only bit of sienna on this whole painting. I am honestly kind of thinking about going with a green and some form of brown, and it might just be yellow ochre. I'm going to lay some down to see what that looks like. Yeah, maybe that'll work, because we've used yellow ochre in the thistle. So that helps bring some of that pigment up, even though it wasn't like a main key feature. Let's see here, and I'm going to do his little armpit. There is a little bit of yellow between that black and where his arm actually is. And I'm just taking clear water to kind of blend and move my shading around just a little bit. And I'm going to pick up a little more, and I want it kind of clear. A lot of water mixed in with it. And we do have the breast area. So I'm going to I want this to be really light, because you can see in the two pictures, one bird it's really extreme, the other bird you don't really see it at all. I want it there, but not too terribly noticeable. So I'll thin that out, but I want that pigment up there. And maybe went a little too far, but that's okay. It blended out beautifully. Yep. Yeah. There we go. And just taking a very light wash of it over the top of my yellow glaze, as they call it. Allows the yellow to still come through It's laying there in the background, but the yellow ochre is also doing its job by helping to define our darker areas and our shaded areas here. And you don't always need to use black for shading. So far we haven't used any black really to shade so much unless the actual object itself was black, such as the head and this wing area so far here. Alright. I think he is a yellow chickadee. No, not a chickadee, but he's a cute little chickie, isn't he? So from here, I kind of feel like I really would like that yellow a lot more intense in a couple of areas, so I'm going to just go over here and grab some of it nice and pure again. That's one of the nice things about doing all your pure areas and the dark areas to define certain spaces. You can always darken up in other spots. So that's never a big deal. It's not always possible to lighten up. Especially if you're fiddling around with greens and you're got the really, really good thick paper that you get. It's practically indestructible. You can put it, I've heard of people not being happy with their watercolors and then they put the whole sheet in the bathtub and wash it all off, and the only color that won't come off is green. Little nugget that got away from everything there. Alright. And from here, we are going to work on his tail. I would have figured that their tails were yellow like the rest of their body, but the underside, at least, that we are seeing in the photo examples that I've given is actually white. So since this area is already pretty gray, I'm going to pretty much leave it as is and add the black spaces that are on either side of the tail. It's like a little fan. And then you got the little booty. Not really sure what the meaty part there technically is, but there's a little spot right there. Past the meat of his tail. You probably couldn't actually see that part. It's probably actually underneath here. Oh well. There we go. And, all right. So far, since, like I've been saying this whole time, the light source is back here shining on his back, we're going to need to fix his tail, and my husband ran off with my paint. I will be back in a moment. It's my naughty dog. Alright, now I can show you one of the things that I do with my white acrylic. Great big giant tube of it. And there's always like a whole bunch of white paint in the cap, so that ends up being like way more than I'll ever use for this picture. So I will just use it. Now I am back on my round brush number 2, which we used for predominantly the thistle and a large part of his body. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to get some of that white, and I want to mix a good amount of water with it. Now keep in mind, when you're playing with acrylics, once it's dry, it is not going to accept more pigment over the top of it. It kind of acts like a water barrier. And it is also not going to, you can't rehydrate it and move it around the same way you can with watercolor. So I always save this for the very last steps. And I'm going to put a little shine in his eye, just a little drop. Help set his eye off, just sparkle and shine just a little bit. Just a little tiny dot. Alright, and now for his tail. And I'm just following the shape that I see in the picture itself and defining some of these white spots. I'm not going to completely paint his tail white because it doesn't really need to be. It just needs to have a couple of highlighted areas, just a little bit. Now I went in there with my finger to make that less severe. You can still see that white line, but it's not quite as intense. And it ended up fading up beautifully into his tail, and that's just kind of representing, you know, feathers. Those individual little feathers. There we go. And the more I layer this white on, the more it's going to feel, it's going to get brighter and brighter. So that's one of the other reasons why to water it down just a little bit. That way you can just layer by layer correct and fix. And there are occasions where if you only put this on very, very lightly, very, very carefully, you could even possibly go back in with another color and still be able to pick up the paper still peeking through. Is the only way I can describe it, to still grab a hold of other colors going on. So probably just define a few feathers just a little bit more. Maybe make that just a little blacker. And see, I don't want this to be black, super, super black, like we did with his head and his wing, because this is in the background. The further something gets away, the less clear it becomes. So if I went and made this super, super black, that means that it is in the same area of space. In reality, it's this area. If you made it perfectly black, that would mean that this part of his tail is as far away as his head and his wing. Now that's not really the case. It's back further. His little bottom's on the other side of the flower. So I'm just going to darken up a couple of little areas. Use my finger to kind of wipe it downwards. Blending a little bit. You can also do that with a towel or whatever. My finger happens to be handy, so it's there. And I'm going to really water that black down and come in there a little bit. All right, I'm feeling pretty good with that. Maybe I just put a little sparkle of white up in here, just a tiny bit. And since the dots dried a little bit more, I'm gonna probably just touch it up just a tiny bit more, make it a little brighter. And use use my spot brush to get into some more detailed areas. I really want that little eye to be super, super black. Maybe thin that down just a little bit. I'm going to show you a little trick that I have recently learned about, and that's using an X-Acto knife. I did play with this a little bit. You can see my painting's just slightly different than where I last left off. I did play around with this for a little bit. I wanted to see what would happen with it and give myself a little practice before I try to show it to you guys. And it works best in dark areas, so I am going to try to bring this thistle leaf out of his tail a little bit. It ended up getting a bit on the muddy side over here. So kind of just very lightly scratching away at the layers of paint. You are also scratching away at the paper itself. So be very careful. Don't cut yourself. And you really want to be careful. Move very, very slowly and methodically. We're not in a rush. It's not a race. So that way you don't end up taking a big clump off of your paper. And that would be pretty disastrous because the texture that's on the surface versus if you were to take a big clump of it off is going to be completely different, and you will never ever make it look the same way again. Now this is helping to raise it back up into the foreground where it was starting to feel like it was a part of the tail and really, really back there. And I might leave some of these areas the white of the paper yet, but I think from my own personal preference, I'm probably going to go in there with a very pale, bright green to help, again, define it a little bit more from the background, which was the problem I was having earlier. Just making it show up just a little bit more, making it feel like it's closer. And that was, I used this technique in the body here of the thistle to, of course, these areas are still the same. I didn't change those, but some of these little white pecks to help get that textured look. It really worked out very well. And even to like come up here and really make those leaves feel like they are stickers. They are going to hurt. Don't mess with this plant. It will get you. All right. And you know what? I think the brightest green that I have, I'm going to mix it with a good deal of that nice bright yellow to really even bring it up a little more. And I'm just going to touch some of these areas just a tiny bit. I might even just use some of that straight yellow, because that will bring the yellow down from up here down here. Even though it is not the exact shade of yellow, it's still that pigment being used throughout the picture, which helps allow for unity and keeping your painting from looking, since we did look at several photos, it'll help keep your painting from looking like, okay, this was a clip out, you know, cut this bird out, and then you cut this thistle out and put it in front of the bird, and then you glued it down. Kind of a feeling. It makes it more cohesive and flow a little better. All right. And I'm not 100% happy with his beak, but we are hitting the 40-minute mark. And for all you beginners out there, if you are happy with what you're looking at, then at least I was successful. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any other ideas of maybe something you specifically want to learn, maybe a technique, maybe something you've tried painting in the past that you're having a hard time with, you can include a photo, especially in that scenario. You can include a photo, put it in the comments section so that way I know what to reference, and I will do my best to help you out. I love helping anybody, and I love to get help on my own work. Like I said, I am going to continue to work on his little beak a little bit more. Not 100% satisfied with that, but I will post a finished bit. I might even end up turning this into an advanced watercolor class where we put in a little bit more details into him, the bird himself, and in other places. So please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments section what you would like to see. And for all of you beginners out there watching this tutorial, if you are not 100% satisfied so far with what you've got, do keep in mind that you are probably on top of this painting and you can see every flaw. Put it across the room. Maybe watch some TV for a couple of hours, and on occasion during a commercial break, take another look at it. If you have a husband, a significant other, whatever, if you have a friend around, maybe show it to them and see if perhaps there's something about it that bothers you, and if your friend mentions it or your husband, yeah, there is something off, isn't there? Then you know that you aren't the only one. You're not just being super critical. A lot of people out there are way super critical of their own work. I know I am. I won't be happy with this in 5 minutes, and if I put it away for a year, when I think I got it perfect, I look at it again, nope, I can do better. We're always learning, and we're always changing and evolving, so that's just a part of the process of art. Nobody can do anything perfectly. So definitely, take a break maybe from it and come back to it, get some other practice, try some other things, and maybe you can finally fix or see what it is that you are not enjoying about your picture. That is something that just every artist does, and there are a lot of watercolors out there, especially that I noticed the really loose, wet on wet. It just looks way better further away, and you can really see a lot of detail that you wouldn't see up close. It's kind of the opposite of the lace that I was talking about in the previous video. So, give it a break if you are not enjoying it or you're not liking something about it. Sometimes also by taking a break, the next time you come back to it, oh, there it is. That's what's bothering me. It's the beak, or it's the that one leaf on my thistle. You can, now that you can see it, you've had some time to get it out of your mind, you can now possibly fix what you're not particularly liking about what you're doing. Anyway, I will stop wasting your time. Thank you for coming and hanging out with me. I hope to hear from you in the future. Like, favorite, subscribe, do what you do. You can also visit me on my Facebook page, Naughty Dog Jewelry, and my Etsy account, Naughty Dog Studios, and give me a ring. Hope to talk to you or comment with you, however, soon. Have a great one, guys. Bye.